Hi, all. Welcome back to our next activity. I like to say that I'm glad those of you guys who are continuing to do your work, please keep it up. Please keep doing what you're doing. I will ask that I did post on Monday a check-in, just a short Google form to see if anyone wants to do a live classroom. So far, I only got one response. Um, so please, it'd be beneficial if I got a little bit more responses in there to see if we can do a live classroom and maybe even go from there to see the day and the time. All right, other than that, we're going to jump into today's activity. Today's activity is a two-part activity, so I'm going to go over it today, but tomorrow you are going to continue working with this activity because some of the activities here are very long. So there's two parts to it. The first part is there's a chart here. We're going to talk about responses to, like maybe the 60s, the civil rights movement, and everything that was going on in the 60s and 70s, and how it affected race in America. We're going to go over two types of responses, and we'll discuss which response ended up taking over. And then afterwards, you're going to fill out this chart here based off the documents that are found below. Okay. So, in the 1970s, there were going to be two types of responses. There's going to be the liberal response and the conservative response. So we're going to go over what these responses meant. We're going to start with the core beliefs of the liberal responses, which are found right here. So, for instance, government action helps to achieve equal opportunity and freedom, eliminates social ills, and protects civil rights so no one is in need. So, for the poor, for people who are being discriminated against, the liberals believe the government should respond. It should have programs that help these people out. They would increase federal spending on social programs such as welfare, social security, healthcare, education. So these are all programs that are designed to help out people who are in need. They would have tax rates based on income. So the more money you make, the more you would pay in taxes. For instance, if you got made over $100,000 a year, that's a significant amount of money, especially in the 1970s. That means that you would be taxed at more than like 30% instead of 10% if you're making only $10,000 a year, right? Less government control over social issues. They would expand civil liberties, meaning people have more rights to protest, people have more rights to speak out, stuff like that, and a increased government control regarding the economy and regulations. So these are all core beliefs of liberals. Increased government control regarding the economy means that the economy is regulated. So people on Wall Street cannot just do whatever they want. There's rules in place to keep people on Wall Street from stealing money from the poor and other issues like that. Now the other side is the conservative side. This would mainly be, so again, the liberal, by the 1970s, this would be the Democratic Party that we know today. The Democratic Party would be part of the liberals. Not in the 70s, not fully yet, because in the South, there were still Democrats who were conservative, just because of the old tradition that Democrats were the conservative party, especially in the South, right? That still goes all the way back to the Civil War, when the Republicans were the party of Lincoln and they fought the Civil War against the South, and the South was the party of Democrats. Now, the conservative faction is what's going to end up being the Republican Party. And what we're actually going to learn is that there's going to be Democratic presidents who are both liberal and conservative at the same time. It's one of the most interesting things about Bill Clinton is that he was a Democrat who was pretty liberal in a lot of areas, but there was also areas that we will learn about that he was actually quite conservative as well, and he uses conservatism to be able to get elected. Now, if this was a political strategy course, we would be able to talk about if that is effective or not, right? And maybe when we talk about Clinton and more specific the war on drugs, we'll get into that. But for now, let's just think that most Democrats would be on the liberal side and Republicans would be conservative. All right, so the conservatives, they believe the role of government should simply be to provide people the freedom necessary to pursue their own goals. So, like this individualism, meaning that people need the freedom to be able to do what they want, uh, and the government does not need to meddle in their affairs. They focus on personal responsibility. So a lot of times you would hear that, if somebody is poor, the blame would be on that specific person, right? So a conservative argument would be, well, that person is lazy and they don't want to have a job, okay? They wouldn't be worried about the social structures that were in place that are causing a person to be poor. In general, against increased taxes. They're against increased taxes. They're especially against increasing taxes on middle class and the rich. What we will learn is that a lot of times they're against increased taxes, but they will tax the middle class. Like, for instance, when Ronald Reagan was in the 1980s, he will end up taxing the middle class at rates that he didn't at least run on. More government control and increased involvement in economics and social programs leads to less freedom. So they want the social programs that we mentioned, welfare, social security, to have less government control, have less funding, because they believe it takes away the freedom from those who have to pay into it. They focus on traditional values, increased control of social issues. So instead, for instance, they're against gay marriage, they're against abortion, they're more for gender roles, and they support strong national defense system, and they spend a lot of time and money on their budget on strong defense systems. Okay, so what you're going to do here is you're going to answer these questions. What are some of the key differences between these two political ideologies? Okay, so just some of the difference I just discussed. And what approach do you agree with more? I mean, this is a debate that goes on in America all the time. I think what you can see in, for instance, the Donald Trump election is that America is very divided. There's about half people who believe in the liberal, and about another half of people who are more conservative. And I think since 2000, this actually probably since 1992, we can see that um, both ideologies exist because our elections have been very close for the past 30 years. What did happen in the 1970s and 1968, actually, when Nixon won the presidency, was that the conservative faction ended up taking over American public, and they would actually be in charge for like the next 24, some would say, 32 to 40 years. Uh, so okay, so it's okay to be a conservative and it's okay to be liberal. This is your approach. What do you agree with? Do you agree with more with the liberals, or do you agree more with the conservatives? You will not be judged on what your answer is there. Okay. So after you do that, you have this chart to fill out. Okay. Now you have this, for instance, the Great Society questions. The Great Society was a speech that's found here under document A, was given by President Lyndon Johnson, who was the president who took over after Kennedy was assassinated. He ended up ruling as a very liberal Democrat, even though he didn't necessarily run as a liberal Democrat because he came from the South. He was from Texas, uh, especially on social issues such as racial equality. But he ended up being a president who really supported civil rights and African Americans, doing well and succeeding. And he set up a lot of programs to help African Americans improve their lives. So you're going to read you're going to read his speech, which is, I guarantee you, a liberal speech, and you'll answer questions here, right? And there'll be more questions here to answer. So, for instance, you have document B, and document B, I believe, starts right here. No, this is still document A. This is still all programs of Lyndon Johnson. So document B here is a speech is below the Republican Party platform presented at the Republican National Convention in 1980. This is a response to the liberal trance from the 60s. Ronald Reagan, who's kind of considered the father of modern conservatism, was the one who ran for president in 1980. So this would be his platform. Document C is the quotes from Marjorie Falwell, a key leader of the religious right, so that's going to be conservative, also known as the moral majority. The group primarily consisted of evangelical Christians who were alarmed by social changes in the 60s and 70s, particularly the feminist movement and the LGBTQ movement, the legalization of abortion, and increase in drug use and crime. Okay, so these people who are part of that religious conservatism who believe that America is losing its morality and it should go back to traditional values. So you're going to read that part. And document D, the text below includes part of the speech given by Ronald Reagan, again, who I said is a conservative president. Upon accepting retirement for president, Reagan discusses his economic policy known as Reaganomics. This included tax relief for the rich that would enable them to spend and invest more. This new spending would stimulate the economy and trickle down to create new jobs for others. Reagan believed that a tax cut of this nature would ultimately generate even more revenue for the federal government. So I'm just going to quickly explain that. Trickle-down economics was this theory. It's also known as Chicago School of Economics, but this theory that the less you tax the rich are going to have more money. They're going to spend it in order to create businesses, which is going to lead to more jobs, which is going to lead to more money having to the poor. Now, in theory, this sounds like a great economic way of life, but what ends up happening, and there's a lot of statistics that prove this out now, that the rich, when they have more money, instead of spending it and creating more businesses, which some do, and they do, some of them, but they also take a lot of their money and they just save it and they don't spend it, and that money does not go back to the poor, leading to the rich getting much richer while the poor, they're kind of left on their own vices. And that's what's going to happen is basically, in 2008, when we had the economic recession, it's pretty much came from, there was a real estate bubble that burst, and there was a lot of factors that led to that recession, but one of it was the fact that there's such huge income inequality, meaning that the rich make so much money and the poor, which is the majority of the population, don't have a lot of money. All right, so those are the 4 documents that you have to read. Please fill out this chart. Again, this is not going to be due till Thursday night, so work at your own pace. Go back to this video. If any questions come up, please respond to me, and I will make sure to answer them. All right? Thank you.